we are live. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Sincerely Agile with Mary. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, on this show, we promote the lean agile mindset. We learn, unlearn, and relearn. And of course, it's a place where we want to be awesome and wholesome together. Now, today we're looking at clean language. Now, you might be thinking, how do we clean our language? You'll be amazed how much we can pollute our communication. So, to do justice to that conversation, I have Erin Randall joining me on the conversation. So, I'm just going to bring Erin up. Hello, Erin.
Hi, Mary.
How are you?
I am lovely today. It is a beautiful Sunday. We are getting some rain and we're going to have dinner with a neighbor, I think, later tonight. So quite good. How about you?
Fantastic. That sounds great already. As soon as the show finishes, I'm just going to go across the road to see my daughter because yesterday she was at the A&E with her son. So I have to pop in to see them again this evening. So that's what I'll be doing immediately after the show. Now, it is so lovely to have you on the show, Erin. I have been on a few of your, online, engagements, and you do an amazing job.
Thank you.
Now, yes, you do. How have you been during this COVID period? I was reading an article of yours recently, and it seems you've been doing a whole lot. Now, tell us, what have you been up to?
Yes. I think like any of us, I have been very active during the COVID period. And by active, I mean, what were the things that I was doing at home? And I doubled down on, some ORSC training, that organizational relationship and system coaching work. I did a lot of deep thinking about some different topics that I wanted to dive into.
Yeah.
Finished some big certifications, that kind of thing. And I guess one thing I'm grateful for is that I did have time for some of that room to go sit with some of those questions and really think about what they meant to me, for me, for the work I'm trying to do.
For what you're trying to do. And talking about being productive, I've done my little bit. I finished my MBA in management consulting, and I took a few certifications myself.
What did you finish up?
I did a few IC Agile certifications. I did a certification on agility health facilitation, as well as objectives and key results. Yes. And of course, I started this show. I started Sincerely Agile with Mary.
Nothing like a good pandemic for us to be like, you know what, I think I'm going to go do this. And then we go off and try it. Yeah.
The thing is, it was a bit of a paradox, isn't it? I mean, it was dark, but it was also a period of reflection for most of us, wasn't it? And
it was.
We got on with what we could get on with, essentially. So let's see. I believe we have some people joining us already, Erin. I have my regulars here. Now, Ronke is always here. Victoria, my daughter, occasionally here. Kemi, my friend, always here. Kende, hello, how are you? I think he's joining us for the first time. And we have another new guest here, audience here. So fantastic, nice to have you all joining us, and I believe more people will join us. Now, let me introduce you to our audience, Erin. Let me bring up your bio and tell them who you are. Now, Erin Randall is an organizational relationship and systems coach, a certified professional coactive coach, and an expert agile coach, credentialed by the International Coaching Federation. She has served organizations through agile implementations and transformations, restructuring teams and executive team reboots in Fortune 500 companies. For over 10 years, she has partnered with organizations, leaders, executive teams, and boards, as well as other coaches from around the world. Erin splits her time between Austin, Texas, and rural Montana. She can often be found in bookstores, on hiking trails with her dogs, or at one of the agile coaching circles she co-founded. Connect with her on LinkedIn or experience coaching for yourself by booking a session at her website, which we will share with you later. She is all about happy people doing great work. And that is exactly why we have her on the show today. She's all about happy people doing great work. Erin, you are welcome to the show.
Thank you
Now,
so much.
our topic today, clean language. Now, why do we need to clean our language, Erin? What are we polluting?
Well, I always find it funny that people want to talk or have me talk about this because I've had friends and clients say, Erin, you're talking about clean language. I've heard you speak. You curse a lot. And they're like, what are you doing talking about clean language? I'm like, well, it's not quite what you're thinking there. It's not like putting a bar of soap in someone's mouth and saying, really clean up your speaking. No, clean language, it got its start with a man named David Grove. And he really did a lot of work as a psychotherapist. And he developed this technique as a way of helping clients heal from trauma. And we're seeing more and more coaches over in the Agile space begin to bring in this skill as we work with teams or individuals or even organizations.
Yeah. And that is what we're trying to really understand here today, what clean language really is all about. And what you have just said here, if I can just reiterate that, is that it's not about not cursing. It's not what people think.
Right.
I mean, like you said, your friends just accuse you of, have accused you of, not having the authority perhaps to talk about clean language because you curse. But very soon we will see what that is all about. Let's see, do we have, okay. And we have Stella here saying, hello, ladies. Hello, Stella.
Hi,
nice
Stella.
to have you here as usual. Now, so you have just told us where it originated from David Grove.
Yes.
Now, why did he think language needed to be clean in the context of what he did at the time?
So if we think about clean language, really as a technique to help, people, teams, organizations, clean language helps them to develop their own symbols and their own metaphors rather than using the symbols or metaphors of a coach or a facilitator or leader. Okay. So this is me as a coach or someone facilitating a conversation, asking for the voice of the person who has been impacted or the organization that has been impacted.
Right.
I'm going to use their metaphors or their symbols or their words rather than forcing mine onto them.
Right.
So if we think about clean language, it's combining, different elements of communication. Specifically, we're kind of looking at four, syntax, how we word a question, the different vocal qualities we use in asking that question, and then nonverbal language, or nonverbal behavior. And we might think about that as body language. So I like to think about this, how do we structure the question? What words do we use in asking that question? What does our voice sound like? Or what does my voice sound like when I'm asking that question? And what is my body telling the person when I'm communicating with them? All right. So what I love about clean language is that, number one, the focus is not on me. It is keeping it on the person with whom I'm working or the organization. It helps me. It's a tool really as much for me as it is for anything on how to stay in curiosity and out of judgment. Okay. It helps me to keep the focus on them where it should be.
Fantastic. So essentially, like you said, it's not about us. It's about the client or the person.
Right.
And as you were talking, what came to my mind is, when you're in a courtroom and you hear you're leading the witness.
Right.
You're leading the witness. So can you expand on that?
Certainly. So when we think about questions, there's any number of ways to ask questions, but asking leading questions, and I think I did, I wrote a blog post and it was like 3 kinds of questions to never, ever ask in coaching conversation. And one of these categories was leading or judgmental questions. Okay. If I'm staying with someone else's language or metaphors, I'm not imposing my judgment or what I'm thinking on them. I'm really following them as I work through what they're coming to the table with. Okay.
Yeah.
it keeps me from that. It keeps me from some of my own worst habits around judgment or leading them where I think they need to be. I'm not there to fix something for them. I'm simply there to help facilitate a conversation where they find the path through on their
Hmm. So it's not about you thinking this is where they should be headed. It is
right.
about you being intentional, listening actively, and being very curious about, what
Oh,
is
yes.
going on at that point in time. That is
Yes.
interesting. Now, Stella says, I'm associating this with effective communication. Absolutely. Before I knew about clean language, I used to be conscious of transactional analysis, where you're
Mhm,
thinking about, the parent mode, the child mode, and stuff like that. And
mhm.
then I found out about clean language, and I'm like, wow, we really do need this in the coaching space. And it's not just the coaching space, it's in any communication, really, isn't it?
So I completely agree. We do need this in the coaching space, because it helps keep the focus off of us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with the client. One of my, well, to be honest, two of my favorite topics to
Yeah.
work with as a coach are both questions, but also metaphor. I mean, metaphor is, it's a bridge, it's a way of thought long before it's a way with words. And by using clean language to help someone find their own metaphors rather than the metaphor I see, that's incredibly powerful, because that's discovering what's coming up in them. And
Hmm.
clean language helps to make those conversations then more fertile, more open, um, and so much more possible, and so much with so much more potential.
Yeah. And Ronke is saying here, in curiosity, not in judgment. Love that, Erin, she
Wow.
said. And I also love the fact that by asking clean questions, we're helping to take them, or should I say, to make them connect more to their subconscious and
Yeah,
to go on a journey of discovery. Is that correct?
that's correct. So I will confess that as a coach, especially when I was first starting to do this work, I received feedback from someone who was assessing, my performance. They said, Erin, more curiosity, less judgment. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh, that hurt. It did, because I'm fighting to stay there. And, as a coach, I was ashamed. I mean, Erin, you're doing this work and you're in judgment, not curiosity.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's terrible. And clean language, because it's from an internal, it helps me to stay that way, in a place of inquiry, curiosity, wonder. Um, that's it's an incredibly powerful tool
Hmm.
that it's more simple. It's kind of like agile, very simple in explanation, but difficult the perfection and the practice of that craft. Um, much like that with clean language.
I'm happy you brought that up because I mean, agile is simple, but it's people driven. And because it is people driven, it's not so easy to actually
Yeah,
implement, isn't it?
right, right. Um,
And I
many,
have,
oh, go ahead.
I rarely use leading questions. Absolutely. Now, as a coach, of course, we go through the learning curve. So I would imagine that, as a coach, it takes practice and it takes being very, very intentional to actually get to being, should I say, great at using leading questions. And hopefully our audience will learn a thing or two from you today with regards to how to use coaching questions. So I'm just going to go back to my banners. Um, I think you've actually touched on this a little bit.
Mhm.
What is so great about clean language? Maybe you can tell us some more, but I believe you've touched on some of it.
Um, trying to think if there's something to extrapolate on that I haven't already talked about. I worked a little bit on the issue of pollution, and that's, you can see it right there. It's a continuation of that metaphor, clean to pollute. And for that, it's really about mindfulness, a stance of what's my intention here. Um, so my flip side question to that would be, what is not so great about clean language? In what you were saying just a moment ago, the practice, how do we go about doing this work? I will spend the rest of my life perfecting this craft of coaching is how I practice it. This is what I read, what I study, what I think about, how will I apply it. And I love taking clean language along with me on that journey because I think it gives me a much stronger stance in those coaching conversations. I would feel a little bit naked, I think, without it.
Without them.
It would. Well, I mean, because I spoke about questions and metaphors as being about the two things with which I work most frequently.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think, if you were to ask anyone, what does Erin talk about? They're like, oh, it's the questions, it's the metaphors with that one. They're like, enough already. But I think clean language helps to strengthen that. Okay.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
And my next question, in what particular context is clean language valuable? Now, just thinking about this question, and when you started talking about the origin of clean language, you talked about people who, are really vulnerable, people who have been in really, probably people who have been molested,
Right.
And time again, we hear about children being molested, we hear about women being raped, and oftentimes the women are even being blamed for probably not even dressing appropriately. I mean, I would imagine that if you want to coach a woman or anyone that is in that kind of situation, that this would be very, very important for so many reasons. Can you please elaborate
Well,
on
in
that?
full honesty, I have never coached in a situation that traumatic.
Yeah.
Number one, if I were to do so, I'd be like, okay, I think I want a little bit more training on a different side of the house just to do that. But you bring up a really good point. I mean, David Grove developed clean language specifically around trauma. And because we are matching their words and letting a client or an organization talk about that situation or an experience through their words or their metaphor, again, we're not putting something on them. In coactive coaching, there's the concept of process coaching of, going down into something, experiencing and then a client finding their own way through and out. And I think clean language pairs particularly well in some of those instances because they're telling me what they're seeing. They're telling me what they're experiencing, but then they're also responsible for that shift. Okay, with that shift, as you will literally hear the conversation and then they'll begin to ask something else as they begin to rise. And this is them coming out of it on their own rather than feeling that they're dependent on me or someone else to get them out of something. So language is valuable because I think it helps to bolster, to build self-esteem, knowledge, mindfulness. And I'm very sorry, the rain has really picked up here.
Oh.
And so if you're hearing things in the background, that's probably it. Yeah. But clean language is valuable. I'm trying to think of an instance where I would not use clean language.
Use clean language.
I think and I see Stella remarking that it makes sense that clean language would be used in trauma. Like I said, I carry it with me. It's one of those tools that I have that, is starting to serve as a foundational level of my practice.
Absolutely.
And I would be a little bit loath to ever not go anywhere with it. Yeah.
I really see the benefit of it because, like you already said before, it's about not influencing what they have to say. It's about not polluting the communication. It's about giving them the space to find their own metaphors and to, sometimes probably even discover themselves. And it could even be a journey to closure sometimes.
It could be. I think of polluting an issue. If you think of an octopus, they have the ink that they can squirt. And if you have water, and if you have a clean, aquarium of water, and an octopus were to spurt ink, it makes that entire issue cloudy. It makes it more difficult for you to see, to find your way through because it's opaque now. Okay.
Yeah.
That's like that ink is like pollution is like that ink for me.
And when that happens, you then put that client or that person in an awkward position, right? Because
Right.
what you have just done there is probably even messed up with their thinking.
Right. Because I'm taking them out of their experience
Yeah.
and inflicting mine on them. And the thing is, I need to back out of it. That's not my thing to talk about. Um, you brought up, how would you coach through something like extreme childhood trauma
Mm.
or sexual trauma, something like that? Number one, I would want, like I said, a lot more training, a lot
Oh,
more
yeah,
training on
sure,
something like
sure.
that.
I mean, we need to know our
But,
boundaries. We really
right.
do need to know our boundaries.
Like this did come from the world of therapy. It's
Yeah.
something that we as coaches and agilists have gone and been like, hey, that looks like a great tool. Let me come over there and pick that up and see what I can do with it. It does serve us on our time, on our side as well. I mean, there are people that have undergone extreme trauma in organizations. There's
Yeah.
PTSD and they're gun shy about, oh, I've had this kind of leader. Okay, but helping them, unearth and ask questions to see that and be like, oh, well, what's next? What's
Yeah.
that like? And help them, give them that chance to rise. Yeah. Um,
Absolutely. I'm
and
Stella
but
here again.
now
Yeah,
you
go
have
ahead.
clean language is supposed to be clear. Okay, Stella, you're a woman after my own heart here. When I'm teaching about how to ask powerful questions, you will often hear me say something, keep it pithy, keep it small. Because if you have a comma in your question, or if someone is trying to parse or understand the question, then they're trying to just figure out the question rather than get and reflect and think about what the answer is. So
Hmm.
clean language is supposed to be clear. Yes.
Yeah. Not taking them out of their experience, essentially,
Bingo.
keeping
Bingo.
them in their experience. Very, very important.
Yes, exactly, Kenny. Exactly.
Very, very, and you've pronounced that name so well.
Well, we have one of the Agile coaching circles. We have one time set up specifically for Africa.
Okay.
And we have a Chemi that signs on often for that one. But one of the teams that I'm coaching right now is women between different nations in Africa, but
Okay.
also Australian women. And
Mm.
there's also Aboriginal women there. So the name of the group is the word sister,
Mm-hmm.
but in Swahili, but also Noongar. So an African word and an Aboriginal language word, and
Okay.
combining the two. So, and also I must confess, everyone, that whenever I'm about to delve into a language with which I'm not familiar, I just start saying things really quickly, hoping that no one will grasp that I'm an idiot.
My next question: how might clean language benefit us professionally? Now we've got
Hmm.
people on this show that are not necessarily agilists and all of that.
Mhm.
I have a next question, which is how can it benefit us personally? Because for me, I see clean language as very important wherever. As a mother, having a conversation with your daughter, with your
With
son, father doing the same,
right,
because sometimes you find that we're trying to connect with our children, we're trying to have a conversation, but sometimes we're not quite getting that connection.
right.
Or maybe because, this is a family
Mhm.
connection, we think it doesn't have to be done in a particular way. So it will be important to know how this can benefit us, both professionally and
As well
personally.
as personally. Well, let's start with professionally right
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Um, Well, I'm a living example of how clean language can benefit one professionally because it's deepening and allowing me to have better, more impactful coaching conversations at both the individual level as well as the organizational level. Okay, but let's also say then that you are a manager, okay,
Mhm.
and you have an employee coming in and you want to do well, what was traditionally thought might have been thought of as, oh, it's just like that every 2 weeks we have a one-on-one. Well, what if we shifted those one-on-one conversations to getting status on different projects that you have going? What if those became coaching or mentoring conversations? How would your organization shift if you were to change the type of conversations that you had? Okay. Secondly, That's just, within that spheres of influence right there, right? If you're helping an organization, let's say again that you might be over on an agile team, or you might
Mm.
be, leading a different side, really getting familiar with the metaphors that an organization is bringing up, because that's giving us clues about what it is like to live in that, to experience that side of it. Okay. And there, I mean, that's a work, I believe his name is Gareth Morgan. What are the 8 metaphors that an organization, kind of exhibits? There's psychic prison, and there's brain, and there's organism, things like that. But listening to that and knowing how to work with that metaphor. Um,
So would
I,
you say those metaphors actually show up the value system of those
oh,
organizations?
yes. Big time, big time. Metaphor is everywhere. It is everywhere. We as individuals use metaphor, 4 to 6 times every minute. We use it far more often than we ever think that we do. And if
Right.
you really want to dig down into this work, this is a book by James Geary called I
Mm.
is an Other, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. He does some beautiful work on explaining metaphor and how it functions, but also
Right.
helping us to understand how pervasive it is in our, in our thought, in our language, in our words. And I think if you're looking for, a way to really evaluate an organization or to get to know,
Mm.
pay attention to the metaphors that it uses. And clean
Right.
language will tie in so nicely with that work, because it's looking at
Wow.
metaphors, assumptions,
Mm.
things like that.
Yeah. And from what I can also see is that we are trying to move away from push to pull, and now taking it one step further to, should I say, facilitating. This is not just a case of pulling now, is it? We're trying to
I think
facilitate
I
that
think you're right.
conversation.
When I think of facilitate, I really think about that as, and you're missing, my arms open wide.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to facilitate that space, to hold that space for an
Mm.
organization. What is possible in here?
Mm.
And, I think it was Stella who had asked, should, our questions be clear? Yes, by all means, at all times. Because if we ask great questions,
Mm-hmm.
helps to frame that space. It also helps to, set boundaries a bit, to know what is possible.
Yeah,
And from a professional stance, how can that not benefit your career? How can that
exactly.
not, people are like, oh, I'm going to go have that conversation with Mary, because
Mm.
Mary, I don't know what it is about what she does, but she asks these great questions. And I come away from a conversation with her, I have new ideas. I have insight on how I might want to tackle that problem. But she's kind of magic about it, because she doesn't really do anything. She just asks these questions. Yeah. How could that not
Interesting.
benefit you personally?
Honestly. And I like the way you say what's possible.
Mhm.
And you can only find out what's possible by asking the right questions, right?
And sometimes that it is literally as simple as what's possible from here. Yeah. Great questions aren't these big, long, strung out. Great
Yeah.
questions are the one they're going to catalyze you to insight. They're going to help
Mm.
you move forward into action.
Mm.
The last
Absolutely.
time I checked, more organizations, they were trying to, how do we, how do we get ourselves unstuck?
Mm.
And having someone who can ask the question that helps an organization get unstuck.
I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Boom. Boom. And when you were talking about how can this not benefit you professionally, I was just thinking how people might just feel, you know what? That's exactly what we need right now within this organization, or that is the person that I need right now to take me to another level. And on a personal level, you
Mm,
can begin to feel as a client that, you know what, I'm not being exploited here, I'm not being manipulated here. This person is actually genuinely
like
here to
curious. Right.
connect with me. This person is actually curious and really wants to help me on
Right.
my journey to discovery. Very powerful.
Think about if we were to employ this as part of our personal relationships. Okay. There are the three levels of relationship. There's,
Hmm.
friendships based on utility, friendships based on pleasure, but friendships based on virtue.
Hmm.
If you want more friendships, more relationships, moving over into virtue where you ask great questions, where you are there for one another and finding what a person
Hmm.
thinks. What about cleaning up your questions?
Yeah.
What about holding that space, for being generous with what you ask and then waiting for someone to answer? And this is
Wow.
how your relationship's going to shift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, Stella is really engaging with us here.
Okay. Come on in,
Stella
Stella.
says, keep questions Stella-licious and simple. As I always say, oh yes, oh yes. I know that,
Stella, I
Stella.
think you should make stallaciously. I think that should be, your hashtag there.
It is.
Bring
It
that
is
out
her
more
hashtag.
often.
It
All
is her
right. Well,
hashtag.
I would challenge and ask everyone who's listening from home then start following that Stellaliciously hashtag and see where it leads.
Stella-licious. Stella-licious. She does have her hashtag. Now, we just talked about how this might benefit us professionally.
Mhm.
I'm really interested in how this can benefit us personally
I
in
think I
our
really started to
relationships.
answer that when we're talking about
Yeah,
friendship
yeah,
of,
yeah,
utility.
yeah.
We're talking about friendships based on pleasure, is who's
But
the person
how
who
can we be intentional about it? How do we come
practice.
together to say, how can we leverage clean language to strengthen our relationship, to make it better? How can we be intentional about that?
Practice, number one. Really just start leaning in on that and intentionally, mindfully practicing.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's, when I'm coaching people who are, how do I get started as a coach? Or how do I do peer coaching? What about being transparent?
Hmm.
Say, hey, even if you were having a conversation with your daughter, what would it be like to see, what's your daughter's name?
I'm Chanel. I've got
Okay.
three daughters. I've got three daughters, by the way.
Okay. Which daughter are we going to use here as example?
No, actually, we're going to be talking about me. I
Okay, no,
have
no,
a
no, but I was
question.
going to say, to give you the example, there was one of your daughters, the oldest was Victoria, was it right?
No, no, no. That's my third one. My oldest
Okay.
is Chanel. My
Okay.
oldest is Chanel.
Well, Victoria Chanel, we're just going
Yeah,
to combine the two.
yeah, yeah.
I'm wondering if you would be willing to practice something with me. I'm trying to lean in on clean language and learn to use this as a skill. Would it be okay if we did this, work a little bit together and then you tell me what it was like and to give me feedback? Okay. I don't know about you, but having someone listen with curiosity and good heart and good intent, who doesn't want to be a part of that conversation? Okay. How is it going to benefit you personally? Better relationships, better connection. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope we're listening to that. We can use this with our families, we can use it with our friends, we can use this with our colleagues, because at the end of the day, I think the world can actually be a better place if we have great relationships. So, we've been talking about clean language,
Mhm.
but let's put it into practice because I'm sure you are all curious. What's all this clean language all about?
What is it?
What is it? What does it look like? So, I'm going to put a context on. I'm going to come up with a context, and Erin is going to walk me through this
Hmm.
with clean language. It is something we're all passionate about, but I'm going to use it anyway. Okay. So, Erin, I worry about the state of the world today.
Mm.
I genuinely worry about the state of the world today.
Let's talk about that. What kind of worry is that for you?
I worry that humanity seems to be progressing in some ways, but retrogressing in others. For
Mm.
example, man has gone to the moon. We have developed amazing technologies, but somehow there's still so much hate. The simplest thing seems difficult, and yet the most difficult thing seems achievable. So For me, it worries me that simple human relationships are, presumably difficult.
So let me do a little bit of reflective listening. I hear, the joy in the progress about going to the moon and the like. But you worry about the opposite of progress, of what is not happening. Can you tell me what that feels like inside?
It feels heavy.
Hmm.
It
What
feels
about that feel?
heavy.
Help me understand the size, the shape. What does heavy feel like?
It often feels like a heavy stone on my heart. That is the truth.
Hmm. Tell me more. Tell me more about that stone.
It feels as though I should be doing something about it.
Hmm.
And I often feel, yes, I should, but how much can I do?
Let's go back to that stone on your heart. Help me understand that feeling. Is it pressing down? Is it just there? What is it doing to you?
It saps me of my energy sometimes.
Hmm.
It really does sap me of my energy sometimes. Um, Only in the last few days, we saw on television everywhere the usual, you know, problem with the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Right.
Um, you see young children suffering. In my own country, we are progressing, but we also have our issues. And you see all these images, and my heart is heavy when I see those images
Hmm.
because I honestly cannot understand why we can't live in harmony. I can't understand it. I can't comprehend it. The issue of race, the issue of injustice,
Hmm.
it's heavy for me. It really is heavy. And when you have children, sometimes you almost feel like, I mean, what a world to leave my children in, right?
Hmm.
So that's the heaviness. That's the heaviness.
What's that word underneath that heaviness? What?
Fear, concern,
Yeah. Yeah.
fear, concern,
Mm.
anxiety.
And I hear
This
that
is
in your voice. I hear it in your breath right there. Fear, concern, anxiety.
yeah, yeah. And this is real for me.
I,
And I know it is also real for a lot of us out there. I know.
Mhm.
What do we do?
Mm. And is it always here in your chest, on your heart? This worry that leads into fear. Is that always where it's at?
Always there.
Mm.
And sometimes I have goose pimples all over me just
Mm.
thinking about it. I get goose pimples just thinking about it. And oftentimes I have said to myself, why am I feeling this weight so much? Do I
Mm.
want to be the president of the world?
Mm.
Why am I feeling this burden so much? It's a dilemma for me. It's a huge dilemma. Why do I feel the weight so much?
And I just want to thank you. I mean, you're using such great evocative words there: burden, heavy, dilemma. What happens when you name those words out loud like this?
Sometimes I just go out and breathe.
Mm.
Sometimes I do that more these days.
Mhm.
Thank God for some of the mindfulness classes I've attended. My garden is just out there. I just step out
Mm.
sometimes when I'm totally overwhelmed and I just stand out there and breathe.
So when you move to your garden and you breathe and you breathe, what happens to your fear? What happens to your worry?
It's still there, but I have a moment of relief, if you like.
Mhm.
Having had more oxygen in my brain, having looked around my garden, looked up to the skies,
Mm.
and knowing very well that I can only influence my sphere, and I then get energized,
Mm.
seriously energized to
Okay.
do
And what's
to,
that energy like?
to do more in my space.
Okay.
Because it seems as though when I breathe and when I comprehend the problems, it
Mhm.
seems as though I get energy from the fact that I am accepting that I am very limited,
Mm.
that I am limited, and that I can only do so much, and that what I can do for myself and for the world, if you like, is to do the best that I can in my little space. And that is where that heaviness takes me to.
I also feel like you've shifted that heaviness, like you've found a way to live with that stone.
Yes, although I feel the weight every now and again, especially when things like I can't breathe happens again,
Mhm.
especially when you hear, someone has just been killed, a woman has just been raped, or a child has just been killed, I feel it again
You feel it again.
and again and again and again, Erin. And it's difficult. I don't know who else feels this way, but at one point I had to talk to myself to say, Mary, you have to take it easy. You really have to take it easy. For me, it's almost as though it's a huge burden. The burden of, I don't know, of just feeling we can all do more. And I am one of those who can do more.
I'm curious, what was there right there? There was a moment, um, you were talking about the burden.
Yeah.
What happened in your body when you talked about that burden?
The usual feeling of helplessness, if you like.
Mm.
But like I said, helplessness and a moment where you also know that you can only do so much. And then you get energized to zoom in to that which I can do.
So we're going to move kind of off clean language just a little
Yeah,
bit into
yeah,
something else that I want to kind of
yeah,
we're going to do something together and
yeah.
experiment. So, and we can all do this though, those who are Stella, especially Stella-liciously. What I want you to do is I want you to take these three fingers
Yeah.
on either hand, and I want you to put them on your hip bones, and even sitting right here together, put them on your hip bones. Then I want you to take your thumbs.
Yeah.
I want you to put those thumbs on your lowest rib. Okay. Now I
Okay.
want you to pretend you have like a jack, like you're going to jack your car up to change the tire. And I want you to add 3 inches of space between your hip bone and your lowest rib. 3 inches of space between your hip bone and your lowest rib. What happens?
I just find myself stretching.
You find yourself stretching. Okay.
Yeah.
In what way? Are you stretching like this?
Upwards. Yeah.
Up. So you're coming up. Okay.
Yeah.
What else happens when you stretch up? When you put 3 inches of space between your hip bones and your ribs?
I took in more air.
You took in more air. Good.
Yeah.
What else do you notice?
I momentarily shifted in my
The moment
thoughts.
shifted. What else do you notice?
I smiled.
You smiled. Anything else?
I'm curious now.
Now you're curious. Where are you looking? I mean, I
I'm,
realize that you and I are looking at one another here on a screen,
I'm looking at you.
but when you added those 3 inches of space,
Yeah.
and generally, I mean, we're kind of all collapsed down.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're looking out. We're looking up
Yeah.
in front of us.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you feel here?
I'm still curious.
You're still curious.
Yeah.
Anything sparking inside?
I'm just thinking, what's Erin going to ask me next?
Well, so this is something you may have seen her TED Talk was a woman named Amy Cuddy, and she wrote a book called Presence. And, she was talking about women taking up space and doing power poses and the like, to really, occupy their space in the world. And a few years ago, I was recovering from some pretty big surgeries, and I was doing a lot of Pilates at the time. And an instructor of mine said, add space between your hip bones and your rib. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's what I was looking for, because it gave me that verbal cue to do that, because all of a sudden I was sitting up straight. My spine was elongating. My core was engaging. I wasn't collapsed on my diaphragm, so I was breathing more open and steadily. Okay. I'm in my body. Okay. I'm cleaning up my language with my body. All right. So it's easier when you've got this, there's alignment, in your spine and your diaphragm and your lungs. Your eyes are cleared up. It's easier to stand in curiosity.
Wow. Erin, like I said, I've been stepping out more often, especially with working from home. When I feel, the world is on my shoulders, I just step out and then I breathe. And then sitting down, I mean, that is me not sitting up now. That's me there. There you go.
So what do you want to name this pose for yourself?
My curiosity pose.
That's beautiful.
Because I've been trying to do this a lot more these days, because I started to feel some slight pain. Okay. And I said to myself, it's your bad posture. You need to sit up more. And you have just confirmed I need to do that more.
So how do you want to remind yourself to step into your curiosity pose?
Just before I sit down.
And remember what it gives you, because think about how much easier it is to access, clean language, good questions, curiosity, heart. Where's that stone? Where's that burden on your heart now?
Lighter.
It's lighter.
But I know it will come back. I only need to hear one bad news again and it will come back.
Okay.
And for me, it is, I did say burden earlier on. It is also that burden of, in terms of what I can do, what we can do, it is that burden of posterity often, I think. Because I feel every generation has a responsibility. So I think I feel that burden of posterity. But I can only do so much in my sphere. And I think that's where my energy ought to go.
And notice though, but go into curiosity pose. What's possible from here?
So much.
Okay. Notice your mindset shifted a little bit there.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to be able to solve everything.
No.
But, you said you can influence your sphere.
Yeah.
What if you get one breath beyond that tomorrow and another breath the next day?
Yeah.
And it's kind of those widening circles.
Yeah.
I realized Rilke talked about widening circles in a different perspective, but how would you widen your circle? And I'm also admitting that right now that was not the cleanest question, because it was leaning into my metaphor, not yours.
Yeah.
So everyone watching this, ignore that part.
Yeah. Fantastic job, Erin. Fantastic job. Thank you so much. I just want to go through some of the comments we have here. Oh, sorry. I need to go to Yemi's comments rather. Okay. Yemi says cleaning up questions. This is new. Stella says both personal and professional. Think clean. Absolutely. How can clean language help manage a conflict? She already touched on that somewhat, actually. Do you want to quickly answer that, Erin?
I mean, is there anything additional that you would like to ask about using clean language to manage a conflict?
Yemi, do you want to rephrase that? Kemi, yes, I'm curious to know.
Well, so first, let's go about using clean language to manage a conflict. The first thing I would do is I would back out of the word manage,
Mm.
because I'm not trying to manage it or handle it or do something with it. If I can ventilate that and almost essentially help the conflict to manage itself. Okay, because
When
then
you say ventilate, can you
Mhm.
expand on ventilating that?
So if we ventilate, breathe more, get more air into the system so that things aren't so compacted and nested and, bound together. Because if you can go to begin to pick apart those knots, and I think using clean language, using clean questions help to pick apart those knots. And then you are not so much managing the conflict as making it possible for it to come to resolution. And it's not a resolution that was forced upon the parties in that conflict, but it was one that they came to on their own.
Yeah.
And we're
Yemi, I hope that helps.
uh, so relationships based on pleasure, utility, and virtue. We can thank the Greek philosophers for that.
Hmm.
Yes.
Reflecting, listening, I like that concept, and something a lot of coaches say, absolutely.
Reflective
Absolutely.
listening is incredibly powerful as a tool. And number one, it's helping me to verify and make certain I'm picking up there,
Yeah.
what's being said. And therefore, I'm really having to listen for those metaphors of the other party or the organization. Um, and Stella, I mean, how is it when you feel heard, when you know that someone has really gone to the trouble of listening deeply and listening well? How do you feel? And I'm hoping you actually do respond on that.
You want to respond to that, Stella? And I'll bring it
How do you
up.
feel when someone listens deeply, listens well?
While she's typing again, Grace is saying, I like this practical example of clean language.
This
Kemi
is
is talking,
oh,
I think she
Timmy's
was talking,
frustrated.
no, I think she was responding to some of the things I was saying
Oh,
about being heavy. I see Erin allowing you to talk it out, thus rationalizing her own feelings.
hmm. Help me understand that statement. How was I rationalizing my feelings?
Stella, you want to respond to that? Um,
Or Stella gets no the short.
it's late
Oh,
here
it's
and I'm
late. Fair enough. It's late.
um,
Fair enough. Fair enough. You're like, no, it's late. I completely get that. Okay.
helplessness. Okay.
Okay.
I feel that way too. Kemi is responding to our, the session that she feels that way too. And she's also saying, I like the practical session, picking up a thing or two on clean language. Absolutely.
I'm laughing
Um,
because this is the second time I've done a podcast and wound up doing a live coaching session.
hmm,
Um, it's I didn't even set an alliance before in between us because I'm like, well, this is going out on podcast. We'll just let that
hmm,
there. But it takes a lot of bravery,
yeah.
to do that, Mary, to be willing to let's lean into something and do this live because we have no idea where this is going to go. But
We
to
never know.
talk
We
about
never
sitting
know.
with a burden,
We
all of a
never know
sudden,
where it's going to go, but I believe that is also part of the value we add on this show.
sure.
That people come here and they leave, you know, having had some value because this is a tool, that can be used as a
Mhm.
parent, as a business
Right.
owner.
Yeah.
And it is all about relationship. It's about strengthening and
Mhm.
developing and, improving our relationship. So what's not to like about that? And it's something
Yeah.
we've got to do. For me, knowing very well that clean language can really help us both professionally and personally, I
Mhm.
felt it was important to try and do something we could all also relate to. And Stella is staying here, but sometimes we have to be selfish, she says. I know how many times I have had to say it's not my burden just to keep my mental well being in check. Yeah.
Mm.
And
Sometimes
that's okay.
we need to express, fully what's there for us, but be able to do so in a way it's like, oh, okay. But then, sometimes I need to be on the other side and say, okay, wow, that sounded really heavy.
Yeah.
What's there?
Yeah. What's there? What's
How's that
there?
feel? Tell me
And,
about it.
and sometimes I'm almost envious of people that are able to dismiss these things easily.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm almost envious of people like that, you know. Um,
Not quite though.
well, almost envious, not quite envious, but almost envious of people like that, because I feel sometimes I let the burden linger,
Hmm.
but of course I'm better able to manage it now, or should I
You're
say,
better able to. I mean, you might look
yeah,
at compartmentalization.
yeah,
I've
yeah.
used imagery before with people about, this is, you're putting it behind a door.
This is what she meant to say. She's
Oh,
saying,
oh, okay. Thank you, Stella. I appreciate that because I was like, how did I rationalize? I'm like, But compartmentalization, putting things behind a door,
yeah,
and you have the ability to open the door or to leave it closed or to lock
mm,
it
yeah,
or to, brick it in. Or I've used imagery around faucets, turning something
mm,
on or off. But at
mm,
the end of the day, you still have that ability to go look at it or not. Yeah.
absolutely. And Stella is responding to what you
Hmm.
asked earlier. She's responding to that.
Yeah. That someone is, yeah,
Well,
yeah. Thank you, Stella.
thank you so much, Stella. You're always engaging. Everyone, thank you so much for being here today.
You have a lovely
This is,
group. Everyone really does chime in.
oh,
Um,
yes, they do. Yes, they do. And this is where we're going to sort of call it an evening, except you have any more questions. Now, you can link up with Erin on LinkedIn, and here is her website.
so would
Okay?
it be helpful if I said the name of my practice? Because I
Yeah,
get a lot of people, they look at me like, what is that word? So you pronounce this as admiljoracoaching.com.
yourourcoaching.com.
Admiljora is Latin for
Okay,
better things. So
okay,
because I'm always looking, what does improve? What would be better? How could we
yeah,
make this
yeah.
shinier?
Absolutely. And it's the little things we all do, isn't it, that adds
Yeah.
up. The little
Yeah.
things we all do. And that is why we have to do the best that we can in our space.
Yeah.
And there is also the agilecoachingcircles.com. You want to check
Yeah.
this out and probably join. There's so much to learn, so much to learn.
So we have coaching circles that are at times that are amenable for Europe, for Africa, for North America, and for both coasts of Australia. And the people that facilitate these spaces either have an expert level rating in agile coaching, or they have a PCC rating through the International Coaching Federation, meaning
Federation.
that they've been coaching for 500 hours or more, like someone has paid them to do that work. So we've made certain that those spaces have great facilitators,
Hmm.
but you can either go in specifically with the idea to practice coaching or mentoring with another person, or
Hmm.
you can be in the main teaching room where we're going to demo and then help you start to practice there.
Ronke says we need to learn to pick our battles to manage the burden.
Mm.
I totally agree.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, everyone. Yeah, Agatha, thank you for being here. Amazing episode. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm about to connect with you on LinkedIn for sure.
Well, thank
Definitely.
you, Stella, because I'm actually going to go follow the Stella-licious hashtag because that's the
Absolutely.
best hashtag I've ever heard.
Absolutely, Erin. And she's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, thank you everyone for your time as always on Sincerely Agile with Mary. We will see you again next Sunday, God willing. Erin, thank you so much for
Thank
the
you.
time you have invested here today. And
Thank you.
please check out her website, link up with her. She writes amazing articles, amazing
Thank you.
articles, amazing articles. So you don't want to miss out on that. We need to keep developing ourselves. And as you know, that is what this show is all about. We learn, unlearn, and we relearn. And I hope we have been awesome together here today. So have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you so much. Erin, thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.